Hey guys. I've talked about this a few times on my channel, but I've lived in a variety of cities, and the most common relationship dynamic that I see is a twinky little guy who, without being accompanied by a woman, would surely be perceived as gay, with a larger, either taller or fatter woman that is somewhat masculine. If you don't live in a city, you can pick up on this dynamic just by watching a few episodes of House Hunters. I have a ton of theories as to why this is, and like I discussed in that exhausting video that I made about causation, skipped in school number 3, which I've linked below, it is really hard to prove causation. So today, I just want to have a little discussion about my theories as to why millennial men especially are so feminized and the women are so masculine. I've heard that in the Midwest and in places like Alaska, there are still tons of couples where the man is masculine, big and burly, and the woman is feminine and dainty, does feminine hobbies and things like that. I admit that there may be some selection bias going on here since I've lived in leftist cities, but I'm having a hard time believing that there isn't a greater trend at play here. What we know for sure is that testosterone levels are plummeting year over year. One particularly disturbing study published in the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism in 2007 indicated that men's testosterone levels plummeted 17% from 1987 to 2004, which is 1% per year, and that's controlling for health and lifestyle factors such as obesity and diabetes that are known to affect testosterone levels. The study found not only that individual men were losing testosterone as they aged, which is fairly normal, but that same age men from later eras had substantially lower testosterone than their predecessors. A man who turned 65 in 2002, for example, had much lower T than a man who turned 65 in 1987. The data on women isn't as good, but I hypothesize that our testosterone has been increasing over the years. I found this fascinating study that I've linked below, but it's summarized in this Slate article. Hormone levels aren't born, they're made. A study published today by researchers from the University of Michigan found that women who play-acted scenarios that gave them power over someone else showed an increase in testosterone production, proving that gendered socialization and cultural norms factor along with biological makeup when it comes to testosterone levels. The study had 100 actors pretend to fire a lower-ranked employee, sometimes with traditionally masculine behaviors, such as using dominant body language, and sometimes with traditionally feminine behaviors, raising their voices at the end of statements. A control group watched a travel documentary. In both firing scenarios, the female actors experienced a boost in testosterone levels compared to the control group, leading the study's authors to posit that the simple act of holding power is a testosterone trigger, with or without masculine performance. Very interesting stuff. The study found that women that engage in masculine behaviors or are encouraged to be competitive have an increase in testosterone. Women and men, when encouraged to fulfill natural gender roles, have more normal levels of their associated hormones than if gender stereotypes are turned on their head. Who would have thought? This may be a reason that we see plummeting birth rates, but I digress. I think the best way to conquer a topic of this magnitude without turning it into another exhausting video is to work from the micro to the macro factors of influence. So let's start with the family unit. How has the family unit made men more feminine and women more masculine? We already know that children, and boys especially, are worse off in almost every way if they're raised by a single mother. In terms of gender roles and its hormonal effects, let's first discuss the more logical side of this. A single mother is more likely to be welfare dependent, she's more likely to be a man-hating feminist, and she's more likely to pass this down to her children. This means that she will likely teach her son to hate himself and his toxic masculinity, to repress his naturally masculine tendencies, and will teach her daughter that she should be competitive and that she doesn't need to embody femininity because she don't need no man. She also will teach her pussified son to date a strong woman, further repressing his levels of testosterone because he will not have that chase and conquer aspect of the dating ritual. She will teach her daughter to date non-threatening, low-T men that she thinks pose less of a risk, and in a weird catch-22, her mannish daughter will attract men like this, who are also raised by single moms. There are also the lifestyle factors associated with father absence. Likely because of junk food and lack of fathers forcing their kids to observe healthy boundaries, children raised by single mothers are more likely to be fat and generally have worse diets and lifestyles. We know that obesity has a hormonal effect, and obese men have lower levels of testosterone, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. I did find one study that discussed levels of testosterone and father absence. Male children react more strongly to environmental stressors than do female children. So in 1996, Flynn found that the presence or absence of father was related to the cortisol and testosterone levels of boys, but not of girls. As adults, father-absent men had higher cortisol levels and lower testosterone levels than their father-present peers. The endocrine profile of father absent men suggests chronically high stress levels, which can significantly increase the risk for a number of physical disorders. In all, it was concluded that early family environment has significant effects on endocrine response throughout male life histories. That isn't to say that girls aren't masculinized by father absence, although it does seem to have more of an effect on boys, likely because they have no male role model at all, while girls still at least have the mom. Nonetheless, having parents together and in traditional gender roles will influence girls to follow suit, to be good wives, to want to be mothers, and to allow men to be the head of the household. Without that model and a man enforcing it, girls inevitably will become more competitive, independent, dominant, masculine, as their single mothers reinforce the myth of egalitarianism at best and female superiority at worst. So, boys in single mother homes have no male role model except for ideally a stepfather that sticks around, but more likely just whoever their mom is banging. Without that, there's no one to teach them how to be strong and masculine and how to embody these virtues. Worse, they're likely being taught that their masculine tendencies are toxic and, as such, are discouraged, while more feminine virtues like being emotional, engaging in conversation, and playing nicely are encouraged. This obviously has a detrimental effect on testosterone levels. Next, let's move on to more macro factors, that of education and schooling. There are disproportionate numbers of female teachers in schools. More than three-quarters, 77%, of all teachers in kindergarten through high school are women, up from about two-thirds 3 decades ago. The disparity is most pronounced in elementary and middle schools, where more than 80% of teachers are women. Because of this, we see a lot of the same problems that we do with single mother households. Classroom environments are totally feminized, are geared towards forcing a belief in egalitarianism and fairness, and rowdiness and normal rough play for boys is seen as toxic or even as violent aggression. Boys are also medicated and diagnosed with ADHD when they have a hard time adapting to a female devised classroom setting and curriculum based on sitting put and listening quietly. Little boys often don't learn like that, and they're discouraged from competing, from fighting, and from engaging in totally normal competitive activities, which, as we've discussed earlier, are behaviors that increase testosterone levels. Another detrimental practice has been the reduction of recess and playtime. Little boys especially need to get that energy and aggression out, and that doesn't mean they're defective. They're just different from little girls and should have educations more rooted in outdoor, rough play that encourages competition. By the time they reach high school, nearly 20% of all American boys will be diagnosed with ADHD. Millions of those boys will be prescribed a powerful stimulant to normalize them. A great many of those boys will suffer serious side effects from those drugs. The shocking truth is that many of those diagnoses are wrong, and that many of those boys are being drugged for no good reason, simply for being boys. I completely agree with this, and I think much of this diagnosis is a result of single mothers being unable to handle their normal sons because there's no man in the house to help them channel their energy through masculine hobbies. So they take their kids to sympathetic or just lazy doctors who prescribe them with amphetamines, which, let's be real, are straight up hardcore drugs. Amphetamines also seem to lower testosterone, at least in rats. This is from the British Journal of Pharmacology. Inhibition by amphetamine of testosterone secretion through a mechanism involving an increase in cyclic AMP production in rat testes. In the present study, we found that administration of amphetamine in rats diminished the secretion of testosterone both in vivo and in vitro, and increased the generation of testicular cyclic AMP. The present data provide evidence that amphetamine diminishes the release of rat testosterone by acting directly and dose-dependently on the testicular fragments. Back to competition and its effect on hormones, I think this obsession with stopping bullying has done a lot of damage. I'm not advocating for bullying. It can be really destructive to children, especially if it's focused and excessive. But bullying also helps teach kids how to function in competitive social environments and how to handle criticism. Without that aspect of school, kids might lose out on a painful but essential developmental phase. In terms of girls, primary and secondary education is geared towards appeasing them and reinforcing this notion that they're the same in every way as the boys. They're encouraged to be competitive, to be aggressive, and are being prepared for careers where they will have to compete with men. This increases their level of testosterone, which is reinforced by the lack of normal relationship dynamics that would, in previous generations, be sorting some of these problems out. All of these problems that I've discussed are reinforced in colleges where most students are women. Professors are often Marxist egalitarians who generally don't even believe in the concept of gender. How can we expect them to nurture an environment where men are men and women are women? So no hope at this level to undo the damage done by earlier years of feminized education. And, of course, Society itself is reinforcing warped concepts of gender, which is diminishing male testosterone and boosting female testosterone. Like we discussed earlier, egalitarianism is the focus in schools, and many schools simply deny the existence of biological gender. So girls are being taught that they must compete with men in male dominated fields, and the only way women can successfully compete in said fields is to adopt masculine traits. High T women are more verbally aggressive, more competitive, they take bigger risks, they're more assertive, and they're more dominant. To help young girls compete in these environments, these masculine traits are nurtured. And in work environments, women are rewarded for having these traits. They're more likely to be in leadership roles and to make more money if they can compete with men. Additionally, women are delaying or dismissing motherhood, are never learning how to be good wives or how to submit to men. And because they have no family life, children, or obligations to men that are making demands of them, they're never forced to adopt natural gender roles. A few studies show that women with children have lower levels of testosterone than childless women, and is even lower in pair-bonded women with children. In this sample of Filipino women, mothers had lower waking T than non-mothers, with differences greatest among mothers with younger offspring. Although the number of breastfeeding women was relatively small, available data suggested minimal contributions of lactation as an influence on these differences. Although pair-bonded women had lower T than non-pair-bonded women, these differences were more modest than those seen in mothers, and although small sample size limited strong inferences, were largely accounted for by the associations between motherhood and testosterone. There are tons of societal factors, but I didn't want this video to get too long, so feel free to add your thoughts in the comment section below. But I did want to point out that I think that technology has had a large influence on hormones and gender relations. Technology helps us divorce our natural state. We have Tinder, so there's no thrill of the chase, we can get food delivered, we can socialize with one another. Human interactions are greatly diminished, and we, although men especially, don't have to develop qualities that keep us alive or that force women to choose mates that have those qualities. I hope this is being studied, but if anyone has any source material on this, I'd be really interested to look at it. In terms of environmental factors, once again, I can't mention everything, but there were a few things that I think are quite important, and data's accumulating on these subjects. In women, a study supports the link between excess weight and higher hormone levels. The study found that estrogen and testosterone levels dropped quite a bit when overweight and obese women lost the weight. Additionally, men are less attracted to overweight women and they have a lower sexual market value, so they're less likely to be selected for in mating and to ultimately become a pair-bonded woman with children, which, as we've seen earlier, is the group with the lowest amount of testosterone. In men, in recent years, researchers have noticed general links between low testosterone and other medical conditions. One showed that in 2,100 men over the age of 45, the odds of having low testosterone were 2.4 times higher for obese men, 2.1 times higher for men with diabetes, 1.8 times higher for men with high blood pressure. Experts don't suggest that low testosterone causes these conditions. In fact, it might be the other way around. That is, men with medical problems or who are in poor general health might then develop low testosterone. I used to think that believing in this soy connection was insane, but as I read about it over the years, I started to really believe that there might be a connection between testosterone, estrogen, and soy. I have an estrogen-associated migraine disorder, so a few years back I started doing research to see if there were any dietary solutions that I could employ. A few studies suggested that soy may help, and it really didn't do very much for me, but it did lead me to all of this other research on the hormonal effects of soy and using soy to treat hormone issues like postmenopausal syndrome. If it affects hormones in women, it stands to reason that it also affects male hormones. So I began to take this research more seriously. Then a few years later, there was all of this renewed interest in the subject because people started to notice and identify this concept of the soy boy. The research is pretty mixed, but I still thought I would put it out there as one potential cause of male feminization. It's been covered at length by folks, namely Paul Joseph Watson and Faith Goldie, so I've linked their videos below if you want to check them out. I haven't reached my own conclusion about this for sure, but I think there is probably something to the theories on environmental estrogen. I've also done a lot of research on marijuana use, which is extremely common, especially in millennials, and its effect on hormones. In women, it delays ovulation and makes it irregular, and in men, we all know that it reduces sperm count and sperm motility. But what is less commonly known is that many studies show that THC can potentially be an endocrine disruptor in humans and in animals, since it blocks GnRH secretion from the hypothalamus, which ultimately leads to lower testosterone production. I also should note that if you quit, the effect appears to go away and it's completely reversible. This was a difficult script to write because it could have been 5 times longer. I didn't even talk about the importance of breastfeeding and how formula has negative hormonal effects, GMOs, BPA, estrogen in the water. There were tons of other environmental and even genetic factors that I didn't include. But I just wanted to start this dialogue without overwhelming you because we have a real problem here. Men and women aren't attracted to one another, couples have fucked up relationship dynamics, and social engineering is clearly compounding these issues. Our birth rate is way down, and I suspect that the reasons we've discussed are, at least, partially responsible. We need to return to an era of feminine women relying on and submitting to their masculine husbands. That's the only way to fix this. The good news is that we can do something about this. If you're a man and you want to get your testosterone levels up, work out, lose weight, eat a low-carb, high-fat diet, reduce soy, engage in masculine hobbies. If you're a masculine woman, reduce competition in your life. Find a masculine man. Subdue your aggressive traits by taking up feminine hobbies and learning how to be submissive. It's the only way we can turn the ship around. Let me know in the comments section additional factors that I didn't mention that you hypothesize are negatively affecting hormones, or patterns of thought and behavior that are reinforcing these warped gender roles. I'm really interested in hearing what you have to say. Thanks, folks, and I'll see you soon. Bye.